3 days before Maurice Gibb's heart stopped beating, he walked into the hospital still able to speak, signed his admission papers himself, and even reassured his family that it was nothing more than a mild stomach ache. 3 days later, Maurice Gibb died on the operating table, at 53, because of a misdiagnosed twisted intestine and a resuscitation device that had been mistakenly placed all the way on the 8th floor. That sudden death didn't just take away the quiet heart of the Bee Gees. It ignited a storm of questions that have never been answered. Was it a medical accident, negligence, or a secret the Gibb family has been forced to keep silent for 2 decades? But his tragedy didn't begin in that emergency room in 2003. It simmered throughout his entire life, hidden behind the gentle smile, behind the guitar lines and bass grooves that the whole world danced to, without ever learning the name of the man who created them. Maurice was the genius behind the spotlight, the architect of the Bee Gees' sound, yet forever overshadowed by the glory his brothers carried on stage. The more gifted he was, the lonelier he became. The more successful he grew, the deeper he sank into alcohol, into nights he couldn't control, into a battle he himself never fully understood. How could the man called the heartbeat of the Bee Gees leave this world in silence and suspicion? Maurice Gibb's story is not merely the chronicle of a musical genius. It is a painful warning about the true cost of fame, a light so blinding it always demands a soul in exchange. And today we trace every fracture that shaped the life behind that music. The half-finished sounds from recording studios and the ambulance sirens echoing across Miami that night were merely the final chapter of a story that had begun long before. Back when a boy was born into the icy winds of the Isle of Man, where music wasn't a dream, but the only way to survive in a family forever struggling to make ends meet. Maurice Ernest Gibb let out his first cry on December 22, 1949, just 35 minutes before his twin brother, Robin. For those two boys, that gap of less than an hour became a string of fate. They didn't just share blood, they shared sensitivity, intuition, and a peculiar inner world no one else could access. The Gibb household wasn't big or luxurious. It barely fit 6 people during the bleak post-war years of Britain's economy. Yet it held something money could never buy: their father Hugh's drums and the warm, lilting voice of their mother, Barbara. Maurice revealed his difference early. While Barry chased melodies and Robin drowned in emotion, Maurice became obsessed with sound's architecture, the part others heard and forgot. But he needed to understand why it existed. In the cramped kitchen, when there was no money for instruments, he crafted a makeshift bass slab out of a wooden box and steel wires, tinkering with tones so haunting that his father would freeze mid-step. No one in the family truly grasped how his mind worked, but they saw one unmistakable truth. Maurice didn't just love music. He could read it the way others read words. Economic turbulence pushed the Gibbs from place to place, from the Isle of Man to Manchester, then to Australia in 1958. For most children, being uprooted would breed fear. For Maurice, it was his first life test. Wherever sound existed, that was home. Under the blazing Brisbane sky, the 9-year-old boy stood at the Speedway Stadium, performing rough, energetic tunes to crowds fresh from the racetrack. No one imagined those humble performances were the genesis of one of the greatest musical empires of the 20th century. Music didn't lift Maurice out of poverty, but it gave him something far more vital: the feeling of being seen. From that moment on, the world was no longer a place where Maurice searched for a place to belong. It became the canvas he was destined to reshape with sound. The day Maurice stepped up to the microphone alongside his brothers, no one imagined that the awkward name, the Rattlesnakes, would become the seed of a musical empire that would one day sell more than 200 million records. The three Gibb boys, barely settled in Australia, turned a whimsical idea into the most distinctive family band of the 1960s. The birth of the new name, Bee Gees, was not some rhyming joke, but a declaration of identity. Barry Gibb, Bill Good, and Bill Gates, the three men who first placed their faith in those curly-haired boys singing under the Queensland sun. From the makeshift stages of Redcliffe Speedway, where engine smoke mingled with applause, Maurice emerged as something strangely different. Barry swept the audience away with melodies. Robin sang with a sorrow that pulled hearts into the abyss, while Maurice, the quietest of them all, silently did what he would do for the rest of his life: build sonic architecture. A guitar, an old organ, even a few piano keys were enough for him to turn a song into an entire universe. From that moment, the trio didn't just sing, they designed music. Their professional door opened when they signed with Festival Records and appeared on television. Those shows weren't glamorous, but they revealed one undeniable truth. Maurice had no desire to be the star in front of the camera. He wanted to be the one controlling everything behind it, from rhythm to harmony. He built the structure. Barry told the story. Robin breathed emotion into it. The division of roles was so natural that anyone who saw them understood. This wasn't a band formed by chance. It was a creative ecosystem. 1967 delivered the first shockwave with New York mining disaster 1941. The world heard Barry's voice, remembered Robin's tremble, but it was Maurice's bass lines and dark harmonies that made the track feel like a cold, hollow tunnel, burying men who would never return. While other bands viewed the studio as merely a place to record, Maurice treated it as an instrument, something he could bend time with, imprison feelings inside, and craft sounds destined to outlive their makers. At a time when critics still doubted the Bee Gees, Maurice saw something no one dared to imagine. Sound was not just something to hear, it was something to experience. And from that point on, the Bee Gees were no longer a band surviving on luck. They were a creative machine, guided by a silent genius standing in the shadows. The rules of the stage never changed. The lights were only bright enough for a few faces. After New York mining disaster 1941 put the Bee Gees on the world map, the real explosion came in 1968, with a string of hits that made the whole world turn toward England. Massachusetts rose like a melancholy anthem of the era. Words became the love song of millions. To Love Somebody was recorded by hundreds of artists. And I've Got to Get a Message to You pushed the Gibb brothers onto charts they once barely dared to dream of. In every one of those songs was a detail listeners didn't notice with their eyes, but felt with their instincts. Vocal layering, the hidden weapon Maurice engineered. Maurice didn't just play bass or organ, he transformed the studio into a chamber of emotion. He stacked vocals, harmonies, even breaths, layer upon layer until the result felt like an invisible choir standing behind the Bee Gees. That style of harmony became the group's fingerprint. You could recognize a Bee Gees song within seconds without seeing who was singing. Yet that very perfection bred a cruel paradox. When people looked up at the stage, they called Barry's name, the blazing falsetto. They remembered Robin, the ache in every line. They didn't know what to call Maurice, even though the Bee Gees' entire sonic world rested in his hands. By 1970, internal tensions forced the Bee Gees to pause. For the first time, no longer hidden behind the three-man structure, Maurice released Railroad, his only solo single of that era. It didn't climb the charts, didn't shake the media, but it revealed a truth that anyone alive has felt at least once. The person behind the spotlight sometimes just wants to know whether they exist at all when they stand alone. The silence that greeted Railroad didn't hurt the Bee Gees. It cut into Maurice himself. In the studio, he was the technical brain. On stage, he was the keeper of the pulse. In the audience's memory, he drifted behind his celebrated brothers. That feeling of not being seen didn't come from failure. It came from success that had swallowed his name. He turned to alcohol, not to forget music, but to escape the invisible erosion of pride. Music created the Bee Gees, but it was the imbalance between contribution and recognition that quietly pushed Maurice toward the dark. And this was only the beginning of a long war between a silent genius and the hollows in his soul that no one dared to name. The screech of tires under a car on a Miami bridge seemed like nothing more than an ordinary moment, but inside Maurice's mind, it detonated into a bass rhythm that slammed straight into his brain, a pulse that would later become the backbone of jive talking in 1975. There was no studio epiphany, no grand creative summit. It all began with the collision between real life and the mind of a sonic genius. When the song was released, audiences danced to those deceptively simple bass patterns, unaware that the man who created them was hiding in the corner of the studio, never asking for the spotlight, only the satisfaction of hearing the music completed. Jive Talkin' wasn't just a hit, it was the doorway to disco, not powered by Barry's falsetto, but by the low-frequency heartbeat Maurice engineered like an artificial soul for an entire decade. That explosion hurled the Bee Gees straight into 1977, the year Saturday Night Fever became a cultural superstorm. By then, Maurice was no longer merely a bass player, he was the architect of an entire sonic universe, the mind behind the bass line of Stayin' Alive, the harmonic foundation of Night Fever, and the layered soundscapes that made listeners feel as if they were stepping into a world built out of frequencies and desire. Stacked synths, compressed bass creating tension, and silences placed with surgical precision to force the listener's heartbeat into sync. These were Maurice's techniques, not accidents of fortune. Rolling Stone didn't hesitate to call him the heartbeat of disco, a title that sounded like praise for the whole Bee Gees. But in truth, it belonged to one man, alone. Maurice. The domino effect that followed turned the Bee Gees into a chart-conquering behemoth. In 1978, they occupied 15% of the entire Billboard Hot 100, a statistic so staggering that not even the Beatles had ever achieved it in such direct fashion. While Barry was hailed as the stage commander and Robin became the voice that cut into the collective heart of the era, Maurice quietly built the technical foundations behind a fleet of hits that didn't even bear his name. Songs by other artists, one seemingly unrelated to the Bee Gees, carried his fingerprints. Unconventional harmonies, bass lines that drove the rhythm forward, and multi-layered recording techniques that made each track feel as emotionally dense as a film. People knew the songs were hits. They simply didn't know the man manipulating every frequency, deciding when instruments should fall silent so a voice could rise, was Maurice. The bitter irony was that during award ceremonies and triumphant moments, he barely stepped into the spotlight. No microphone, no speeches, no scramble for attention. His silence led many to assume he lacked presence, when the truth, well known to the industry, was that without Maurice, the entire sonic architecture of the Bee Gees would collapse like a skyscraper with its foundation ripped out. He existed in the most paradoxical way possible. The less he appeared, the more indispensable he became. The quieter he remained, the louder his music echoed. And at that very peak, a question began gnawing at Maurice's soul. What remains when the lights go out? If the world remembers only the voice and forgets the man who built its heartbeat? The question had no answer in 1978, but it began opening the door to the deeper shadows that would follow him for the rest of his life. The concert hall was silent enough for people to hear every breath, but backstage, Maurice Gibb was battling a different kind of noise. The feeling of being abandoned by the world. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the ambitious film project the Bee Gees hoped would reinvent their image, collapsed into one of the box office disasters of the early 1980s. That failure didn't just turn the group into a punchline for the press. It shattered the fragile self-belief Maurice had barely managed to rebuild after years of blazing success. The criticism wasn't aimed directly at him, yet every review pierced the same unspoken wound. The agony of being overshadowed inside the very musical family he had helped construct. The disappointment spread like a dense fog. From defining the entire disco decade, the Bee Gees suddenly became a relic of the past. Barry dove into ambitious solo projects, Robin searched for a space where he could assert his own identity, and Maurice, the glue that held everything together, was pushed further into the background. No spotlight, no applause. Recording sessions continued, but he entered the studio with eyes that no longer carried light. The man who built their harmonies, who created the thick emotional textures that defined their sound, was now left outside the door, while the band tried to redefine itself. Silent spirals of depression clung to him, not loud, but corrosive enough to erode every remaining anchor. The irony was merciless. While his brothers chased new paths, the Bee Gees' resurrection in the late 1980s was laid upon the musical foundation Maurice quietly rebuilt. In 1987, when the album ESP arrived, most assumed the Bee Gees' time had ended long ago. Yet You Win Again surged to the top of the European charts, marking a stunning comeback. Its eerie harmonies, familiar yet unsettling instrumental structures, and sonic architecture that felt both solid and emotional, every detail bore Maurice's fingerprints. That success didn't erase old scars, but it felt like a breath of resurrection, a reminder that sometimes the man in the shadows is the one who holds a legend's soul in his hands. Maurice never stood on stage as a triumphant figure, yet every note of this era said something for him. Not everyone in the spotlight is the center. Sometimes, the center is the one in darkness, tuning each note until the world moves to his heartbeat. Success is never a smooth road. After conquering the world, the Bee Gees were swallowed by chaos, and Maurice bore more of its weight than anyone else. In 1980, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the project once expected to usher the Bee Gees into cinema, became a catastrophic failure. Critics attacked brutally. The press mocked them. The Gibb brothers became cultural jokes. And the blade struck Maurice where he was most vulnerable. The belief that he was nothing more than a shadow behind Barry and Robin. From silent architect to a man adrift, he slipped into depression, drowning between cold studios and glasses of liquor thick with doubt. The aftermath bled into the early 1980s. As Barry and Robin pursued their own identities, Maurice's name faded from headlines, as though he were the only one without a personal story. The truth was harsher. He was still shaping the harmonies, still layering vocals, still building the framework of every arrangement, but that role was never acknowledged. Inside the music world, everyone knew a simple fact. Without Maurice, there was no Bee Gees sound. Yet outside the studio door, there was nothing left for him but silence. Then, in 1987, that silence unexpectedly broke. ESP emerged as a rebuttal to fate, igniting an extraordinary rebirth. You Win Again shot straight to #1 across Europe, signaling a triumphant return after nearly a decade in exile. To most listeners, the Bee Gees were back, To those paying attention, the icy, razor-sharp sonic layers in the track revealed the truth. Maurice had rebuilt the Bee Gees from broken pieces. But before the studio lights could dim, a chilling rift opened between the Gibb brothers. On January 12, 2003, Maurice Gibb, the architect of their sound, the silent soul of the Bee Gees, took his final breath at age 53 after a twisted intestine led to surgical complications in Miami. Doctors called it an emergency. Yet 3 days earlier, he had walked into the hospital talking normally. Barry broke down in tears the moment he heard. Robin was so devastated he couldn't leave the room where they once sang together. Barry's later words sent a shudder through the world. The Bee Gees died with Maurice. It wasn't grief. It was a verdict. A sentence passed on a half-century journey where 3 voices sang as one, but only one kept the heartbeat alive. After This Is Where I Came in 2001, their final album before everything fell apart, Maurice sensed cracks forming in both body and spirit. He no longer wanted to mediate, to soothe the opposing emotions of Barry and Robin. During a press conference, when everything seemed fine, Maurice spoke words that left Barry speechless. "I just want us to be together again, like we used to be. No fireworks, no triumphant finale. Just the exhale of a man hearing time run backward." In 2002, stomach pains tormented Maurice, but he ignored them. The man who once crafted bass lines that made the world dance didn't realize his own body was begging for help. By early 2003, the pain turned into a storm. Maurice was rushed to the hospital. His heart stopped twice during surgery. He never woke up. Barry's Miami home has never heard another 3-part harmony since. Robin slipped into depression's shadows. On paper, they were still the Bee Gees, yet musically, they were gone. Maurice wasn't the highest voice, the front man, or the face on the poster. He was the last person to touch every chord before a song was born. And without him, the music lost its soul. The Bee Gees never officially broke up. They simply fell silent. Silent, as if the world had taken the only man who knew how to keep 2 stars in the same orbit. From the day Maurice left, Bee Gees music didn't die. It just lost its heartbeat. And sometimes all it takes is one missing beat for a song to turn into a silence no one can ever fix. While the stage lights of the Bee Gees still burned at full blaze, Maurice's private life entered a different chapter, one not shaped by bass lines or layered harmonies, but by a woman named Lulu, the energetic, radiant Scottish singer who embodied the confidence Maurice had never possessed. They met in late 1960s London, at a moment when the Bee Gees were soaring and Lulu was one of Britain's brightest musical stars. The contrast between a reserved young man accustomed to living behind the sounds he built and a woman who had spent her life at the center of attention created an instant, magnetic pull. Their love unfolded like a summer hit, fast, intoxicating, and impossible to ignore. Maurice was drawn to Lulu's radiance while she caught a glimpse of a gentle soul burdened with shadows. Their lavish 1969 wedding was hailed as a landmark moment in British pop culture, a golden promise that music could bridge 2 rising stars toward happiness. But marriage does not obey the logic of harmony. It is a rhythm that cannot be tuned in a studio. Endless tour schedules, separate ambitions, and lives perpetually lived in transit turned their home into a temporary hotel where 2 hearts rarely beat in sync. Maurice soon felt his shadow lengthen, not only on stage, but inside his marriage. He had always been the man behind the controls, the one who shaped the sound, the one who built the structure, yet never the center. The invisibility he endured within the band morphed into a quiet ache inside his own home. What began as a drink to unwind became a refuge, a place where he felt less like a ghost. Every time Lulu looked into his bloodshot eyes, she didn't see rebellion. She saw a man erasing himself under the bitter weight of fame and expectation. With no children to hold them together, the marriage became a test neither could pass. The very radiance that once captivated Maurice now became a reminder that he could never hold on to the light. In 1973, the shimmer faded. Lulu walked away with a tired heart, and Maurice was left with a brutal realization. Talent can shake the world, but it cannot save a man who can no longer hear the sound of his own soul. From that moment, Maurice began descending into a darker stretch of life, a place where love had once stood, but wasn't strong enough to mend the fractures caused by fame and silence. Maurice learned that silence in music is never as terrifying as silence in one's own life. His love story with Lulu dissolved into a melancholy echo, leaving a man who had reached the summit of global fame, yet didn't know where to anchor his heart. Amid sleepless recording sessions and stage lights that would not die, he realized he needed a space where he could exist as himself, not just a fragment of the Bee Gees mythos. It was during this fragile interlude that Yvonne Spenceley entered his life. There was no explosion, no spectacle. She arrived like a warm bass line slipping quietly into a chaotic arrangement. Yvonne was a model, familiar with glamour's surface sheen, yet strangely attuned to wounded souls. Her calm presence allowed Maurice, for the first time, to feel truly seen, not as a star, not as a genius, but as a man struggling to piece together a life coming apart at its seams. They married in 1975, not for headlines, but to build a haven where Maurice could shed the shimmering armor of fame. Their Miami home became his private studio, quiet, safe, a space where music and love coexisted rather than competed. Yvonne tended to the rhythms of everyday life like a silent producer, while Maurice finally tasted clarity beside someone who did not crave the spotlight. Their two children, Adam and Samantha, arrived like perfect hooks, reminders that some sounds outlast every award, the laughter of one's own family. But no marriage is free from shadows. Maurice wrestled with emptiness, even as applause echoed worldwide. Alcohol threatened to erase everything he had built. Arguments erupted. Nights passed, with Yvonne clutching the children, while Maurice drifted like a ghost inside his own house. It was a challenge more daunting than any Bee Gees album. Yet unlike Lulu, who left when Maurice's darkness became unbearable, Yvonne chose to stay. She didn't abandon him to the abyss. She held the rope and pulled. They endured treatment cycles, relapses, and countless moments when he crumbled before temptation, only to rise again with eyes clear enough to finally see who was holding him to life. Yvonne didn't perform miracles. She built something sturdier: faith. Faith that allowed Maurice to slow down in his final years, to understand that neither stage lights nor legendary status defined him. What completed him was the woman sitting quietly beside the piano while he experimented with new notes, a presence steady enough to silence the void success had left behind. Just when Maurice Gibb seemed to have escaped the shadows of addiction, when family life felt steadier and music finally became a refuge instead of a battlefield, the most unexpected tragedy of his life descended. Not from the demons he feared, but from the very place meant to save him: the hospital. The violent stomach pain began on a January night in 2003. Maurice arrived at the hospital fully conscious, walking on his own, signing his admission papers, speaking to his wife and children as if he would be discharged within hours. Everything seemed routine until the initial diagnosis came in: appendicitis. That mistake was the spark that ignited an irreversible catastrophe. Surgery was delayed. Maurice was left lying in a hallway for more than 2 hours without any emergency intervention, while his intestines twisted with every passing minute. By the time the surgical team was finally activated, something so absurd it bordered on the grotesque took place. The cardiac resuscitation machine, the only device capable of protecting the brain once the heart stops, wasn't in the operating room. It had been moved to a VIP floor. The distance was just a few stories, yet the cost was enormous. 10 to 12 minutes without oxygen to the brain. By the time staff retrieved the machine, Maurice's body was still there, but the parts that defined him, memory, music, identity, were already dissolving. He died at 53. The man who built basslines that made the world dance was killed by a chain of administrative procedures that meant nothing. His family was furious, ready to sue, ready to drag the truth into daylight for a genius who never demanded applause for himself. But Yvonne, the wife who had stood with him through every fracture of his final years, chose an out-of-court settlement. Her decision extinguished Barry and Robin's fury and left a wound festering among fans for 2 decades. If the truth had been exposed, would Maurice still be alive? The silence surrounding Maurice's death did not end with the death certificate. It opened another chapter, one written in whispers and suspicion. Within music circles, he was suddenly given a new title, one fans found both accurate and agonizingly late: the silent genius. A mind that built the Bee Gees' empire from behind the spotlight. A man who treated the recording studio like a personal instrument, layering harmonies as thick as air, techniques producers would later study as if decoding scripture. In the days after the funeral, a chilling rumor spread across music forums: the Gibb family curse. Maurice died from intestinal blockage. Robin died of colorectal cancer and related complications. Andy died of heart issues. 3 brothers, 3 deaths orbiting the same internal system. Some doctors suggested genetic testing, but the family refused for reasons of their own. To them, the Bee Gees were symbols of life, not medical tragedy. That refusal only fueled belief that something remained untold. Everything might have stayed buried until the explosion of 2024. Leaked hospital records surfaced. Internal email timestamps showed that 2 warnings about possible necrosis and intestinal obstruction were ignored. A nurse had even recommended an emergency transfer to the operating room, but it was delayed because awaiting VIP authorization. Attached reports confirmed the resuscitation equipment had been stored 3 floors above the surgical unit, costing the team more than 10 crucial minutes, enough for Maurice's brain to suffocate beyond recovery. The documents contained no apologies, only timestamps, signatures, and cold scene notations from doctors. That coldness is what lit the public anger anew. For the first time, people saw undeniable proof that his death wasn't fate. It was the outcome of a chain of wrong decisions. Then Hollywood poured gasoline on the fire. A Spielberg-backed biopic leaked details of a scene depicting Maurice lying on a gurney in a hallway for over 2 hours, waiting for a medical decision that came too late. Fans who once lived to the rhythm of staying alive now faced a bitter contradiction. The man who gave disco its heartbeat died because his own was left waiting. No one calls him a shadow behind Barry or Robin anymore. Only in his absence did the world finally understand. The Bee Gees could lose a hit. They could lose a decade. But they could never lose Maurice Gibb, the man who kept the beat for the music, the family, and the destiny of an era. Maurice Gibb died at 53, but the rest of the world has never escaped the sound he created. More than 200 million Bee Gees albums sold, followed by 60,000 cover versions across the globe. Numbers not reserved for the star out front, but for the man who built the tracks others would ride on. Critics often credit Barry for the falsetto and Robin for the emotion, yet anyone who dares dissect the architecture of disco must begin with one name: Maurice Gibb. He turned vocal layering into the Bee Gees' spine and crafted bass lines with a kind of genetic memory, sounds you can identify in half a second. From How Deep Is Your Love to Stayin' Alive, the entire industry learned how to arrange music in the Gibb standard, thick, multi-layered, yet never drowning the soul of the melody. The new generation doesn't hear the Bee Gees as nostalgia. Bruno Mars, Dua Lipa, and legions of TikTok producers are mining the same pulse layer groove blueprint Maurice left behind. Today's viral remixes hide an irony. Gen Z believes they invented a new sound, when in truth they've merely entered a sonic world Maurice designed nearly 50 years ago. His official honors came late, but they arrived like punctuation marks carved into history. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, 1997, cemented the Bee Gees' global legacy. CBE from the Queen, 2002, stamped his influence with Royal Ink, a tier few pop musicians ever reach. But the legacy didn't end with music. It runs through blood. In 2025, Adam Gibb released Father's Eyes, a raw excavation of memory and pain, illuminating the shadows his father never put into words. What listeners heard wasn't something new. It was an echo, the echo of loneliness from a genius who chose the shadows until the very end. Barry Gibb once said something that froze the entire industry. When Maurice died, the Bee Gees ended. Not because they lost a bassist, but because they lost the heartbeat. Some deaths close a life. Maurice Gibb's death closed an era, not because he was the most visible, not because he stood at center stage, but because he was the rhythm no one noticed until it stopped. A world can replace a voice, hire a better guitarist, invent new stars, but it cannot manufacture a soul capable of holding music, family, and faith together in the same breath. All his life, Maurice avoided the spotlight. He never rushed toward applause, never argued about who carried the Bee Gees' soul. He simply kept the beat. In music, in brotherhood, in those quiet spaces where three siblings looked at one another and understood without speaking. Some people aren't remembered by their faces, but by the emptiness they leave behind. Maurice was one of them. When he was gone, the pain was not born from his death, but from the realization that the things we assumed were replaceable were, in fact, the things holding everything upright. Sometimes tragedy is not the ending itself, but the moment we recognize someone's value only after they disappear. Do you remember the moment Maurice Gibb carved himself into your own musical memory? Share it below. And don't forget to follow the channel as we uncover the stories behind the spotlight, where the quietest souls often leave echoes louder than any applause.